Okay, welcome everyone. As I just mentioned, my name is Jenny Strickland, and I am the program manager for the Leonardo-ASU Initiative. Leonardo was founded actually in 1968. It is Leonardo slash the International Society for Arts, Sciences, and Technology. It was founded in 1968 by Frank Molina, who is one of the co-founders of the Jet Propulsion Laboratory. We have the world's leading journal of art, science, and technology, so highly recommend checking out our journal. It is published through MIT Press along with the Leonardo book series with some fabulous authors and content there, so highly recommend looking into that. And I'm happy to say that we are now celebrating 5 years Leonardo in partnership with ASU, where we lead the Imagination Fellowship, which you are here to learn about today, in collaboration with ASU's Center for Science and the Imagination, which you will also hear about in just a moment. Along with the Imagination Fellowship, we also have our laser series, Leonardo Art Science Evening Rendezvous. These are a conversation series that bring artists, technologists, scientists together into conversation. And we have these conversations take place virtually and in person in over 60 cities around the world. So we're happy that you're here. We're happy that you have found us. Along with the laser series, we also run the Planetary Health Research Seed Grant, which is done in collaboration with the Julianne Wrigley Global Futures Laboratory, as well as the Herberger Institute for Design and the Arts, made possible by both of these units, as well as the Office of the President. So that is a quick intro to Leonardo, and I'm going to pass it over to my colleague Ed to talk about Center for Science and the Imagination.
Thanks so much, Jenny, and welcome everybody. It's great to see you. It's great to see some familiar names in the Zoom as well, including at least one alum of the fellowship, so that's exciting. I'm the founding director of the Center for Science and the Imagination here at Arizona State University, and our mission is to ignite collective imagination for better futures. We are trying to heal our broken relationship with the future and inspire people with stories of futures we might actually want to live in, and most importantly, to build imaginative capacity and invite people to feel empowered and to give them tools to imagine their own futures. And this is work we've done since 2012 in a number of different contexts, but one persistent thread has been climate futures, and I think you'll see connections to climate and planetary health and all of the work that our amazing fellows are going to be sharing today. And it's really been a wonderful collaboration with Leonardo to host this fellowship and to see these incredible artists and thinkers put their work together and share them. And I see it very much as imagination work. And art is one of the most powerful media, most powerful channels for inviting people to see the world in a different way, to shift perspective. I love the framing of this event, the art of listening, interspecies stories, sensory worlds, and radical kinship, because again, this is something that pushes the very boundaries of our ability to imagine, what we can imagine, the ways that we can empathize with and step into the sensorial and experiential worlds of other creatures on this planet. So very excited for the conversation to come. Thank you all for joining us, and I'll hand things back to Jenny.
Thank you so much, Ed. Appreciate it. And it is my pleasure to introduce our first fellow who will be sharing today, Mattheus Montanari. Mattheus, please take it away.
Hello, everyone. Thank you. I'll share my screen quickly. Okay, is it working?
It is
Perfect.
working.
So, hello, everyone. Thank you all for being here. I'm truly excited to share with you the outcomes of this amazing journey that the Imagination Fellowship has been. I'm deeply honored and grateful to be one of the recipients of this fellowship. And I would like to extend my heartfelt gratitude to the entire Leonardo and ASU CSI team for this inspiring 9 months. My project is called Resonant Waters, Immersive Soundscapes in Human-Dolphin Collaboration, and it focuses on one of the world's last remaining wildlife-human collaborative practices. And through artistic creation and experimental media, we engage not only with the diverse human communities involved, such as local residents, artisanal fishers, biologists, and anthropologists, but also explore ways of fostering interspecies perspective that recognizes the dolphins, fish, and their environment as essential and active participants in this practice. So in this collaborative fishing practice, which occurs primarily in two coastal inlets of southern Brazil, the dolphins forage for school of fish and signal their location to artisanal fishers through body movements. So the fishers then cast their nets in specific locations, improving their chances of catching the fish, while the dolphins benefit by preying on the fish that scatter from the school. But this practice is far more than just utilitarian because it embodies a deep and sustained bond between humans, the dolphins, and their shared environment. It is passed down through generations of both fishers and dolphins. And this tradition holds significant cultural value. You can see that because, for example, each dolphin has a name, and the fishers often speak of them as friends or even as members of their family. And many of the fishers also describe the practice as essential not only to their livelihood, but also to their emotional and mental well-being. It's also important to emphasize that this project is only possible due to the ongoing effort to recognize this practice as intangible heritage of Brazil. And these initiatives, the partnership between the Federal University of Santa Catarina and the National Institute for the Artistic and Historic Heritage of Brazil. And this recognition is a crucial step towards safeguarding the practice, especially as it faces threats from construction expansion and sewage dumping in the area. So we hope that this project can help bring attention to these challenges and engage both local and global communities in its preservation. And what makes this recognition process truly unique is the argument that this is a more than human cultural practice, recognizing both the humans and the dolphins as holders of this knowledge. And this raises one of my central questions, that is, if the dolphins can produce culture in this collaboration with humans, then is it also possible to produce art in this context? So to develop the project, I've been doing a lot of field work where I explore this collaboration in two axes, the collaboration human-dolphin and artist-scientist, where I can observe the practice, but also observe the practice being observed. I'm focusing heavily on sound as the dolphins rely on it for communication and geolocation. And in this regard, my partnership with Lillian Sanders, an acoustic biologist working in the area, and all the anthropologists of the team has been invaluable. Here you can see some pictures of the fieldwork. And we have been recording underwater sounds using hydrophones, as well as capturing sounds on land. Here's a sample of what we've recorded. Can you hear it? So here you can hear the clicks and whistles that dolphins use to communicate and navigate their space. And another important part of the field work is to engage with the fishers. We are doing some interviews and learning so much with them. It is also an opportunity to show the work we've been doing and to get feedback. So in this picture, I'm showing Safiko, one of the most experienced fishers in Laguna, a binaural composition I made using the sounds of the dolphins. And this led to a really interesting conversation about interspecific communication. Um, and with this field data, we've been developing several outputs. I'll present two today. The first one is a generative art piece, which has a dome projection for planetary version as well. And the second one is an interactive multi-channel installation. So our first experiment is a binaural composition that uses a specialized audio to evoke the gestures of fishing and dolphin behavior. Since the dolphins use the sound both to communicate and navigate, the audio here takes on a haptic and spatial dimension. And to explore how sound can generate space, I created a visual layer using a simulation of strange attractors. They are mathematical models that reflect dynamic chaotic systems, including ecological studies of population interaction. And these attractors respond in real time to the audio's frequencies, producing a generative visual environment that is shaped by the sounds of humans, dolphins, fish, waves, and nets. And the result is an immersive, responsive space that echoes the relational nature of the fishing practice. And here you can see a sample of it. Okay, and the second category of experiments I'm developing involves a physical installation, and the main idea is to create a hammock with embedded speakers, so visitors can sit or lie in it, and as they swing, the wave-like motion will disperse the audio in space, creating subtle variations. And these variations are produced both by the physical movement and by a sensor that captures the motion and alters the audio in real time. There are four top, bottom, right, left sets of speakers for the specialized soundscapes, and a couple of speakers attached to Arduino that play synthesized sounds according to the hammock movement. So for one of the synthesized sounds, I've incorporated artificial intelligence as another layer of translation and communication. For instance, while it's common to hear humans imitating dolphins, I wondered what would sound an AI may generate if I asked it to create a sound of dolphins imitating humans. And one striking element in the AI-generated sound is the presence of the mic interference and clicks, adding this layer of technological mediation to the process. That's completely fake, but I think it highlights the role of technology in making these interspecies interactions audible somehow. Um, yeah, quite disturbing. Um, And the other synthesized sound that comes from the sonification of environmental and weather data in the locations. And this relates directly to questions of climate change, pollution, including sound pollution, which is a serious problem for cetaceans. And the hammock is another central element because in Portuguese, the word for it is the same as for a fishing net. And also the mullet fish is central to this interspecies relationship inspired the concept because the visitors metaphorically take on the fish's perspective and becoming captured by the artwork. And this idea is inspired by Alfred Gell's connection between artworks and hunting traps. And the hammock is made from cocoon, a special fiber from the Amazon region. And historically, fishers used this fiber to craft their casting nets before nylon became more common. Here are some pictures of the fiber and the electronic components. I'm sewing them together in the mesh, along with the speakers, and also connecting with the fishing nets weights. And the idea with the installation is to explore how sound can generate movement, space, and displacement, embodying the experience of these interspecies relations and environmental entanglement. I hope it encourages visitors to engage with different perspectives and fosters interdisciplinary, interspecies collaborations, especially because as we face accelerating ecological collapse and increasing distance from the modern human world, I believe we urgently need new ways of listening, ways to allow us to hear not only each other, but also the voices of the earth, the ocean, and the beings we share them with. So this project is an invitation to attune ourselves differently, to feel and think through resonance rather than domination, and to imagine futures grounded in reciprocity, care, and collaboration. Once again, thank you all for being here, and thank you for listening.
Great job, Matheus. Thank you so much. It's always such a joy to hear about your project, and it gives me goosebumps.
Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Matheus. And for those of you that may have questions that come up in the watching these presentations, please feel free to put them in the chat. We'll be collecting them so that we can ask them at the end of the meeting. All right, we are going to move on to our next fellow. So, Awel, I would like to welcome you to share your screen.
All righty. Okay, full screen, successful?
Yes.
Amazing, love it. I feel very grateful to be living in an era in which we are constantly navigating new technological challenges. It's a real growth opportunity. Anyways, hello everybody. Thank you for starting your mornings with us, or afternoons or evenings, or wherever it is where you are. Um, it's been such an honor to be part of such a sharp, imaginative cohort, and all of these wonderful folks have pushed me to really rethink what interspecies art and collaboration can be. And of course, massive thanks to the entire CSI and Leonardo teams for bringing this whole awesome experience to life. It's been super, super cool. Alrighty. Oh, now it's not letting me do the space bar to the next tab. I don't want to annotate, thank you.
I know. Always these learning moments. There
Oh,
you
there we go. Cool, awesome. Now I want to address the obvious. I have no face, or at least not one that I'm sharing here. This is a part of my ongoing journey around de-anthropocentrizing my creative practice. So those of you who came to the January mid-year presentation have already heard my rationale for this choice, but for our newcomers, I'll give a little summary. So, as a young artist, I experienced what most of us do, an overwhelming pressure to turn oneself into a brand, a commodity, a package of labels and niches that would be used to sell your art. I lost a fair bit of myself in that process, and it was only when I found my way into the world of environmental writing that I began to realize how much harm it had done. You see, as environmental writers, we purportedly create not for our own careers, but for a less brandable purpose. We serve for the protection of and devotion to the natural world. Now, what does that have to do with me and the name Awel? So, Awel is an Old English word meaning the source of the spring. In doing this work under that name, I am doing this work under that name, and in doing so, identifying it as a collective process, because that is how artists are made. My work is possible because of the wisdom of the artists in my line: Virginia Woolf, John Tolkien, Walt Whitman, Robert McFarlane, Robin Wall Kimmerer, Alan Watts, Wendell Berry, and it's made possible by the ancestral land keepers of the lands that have made me: the Nansemond, the Piscataway, the Mohegan, the Pima, the Lenape, And of course, it is made possible by the creatures that have walked alongside me and inspired me to dream larger dreams. Lopomus macrochirus, Tyto alba, Gallus domesticus, Canis lupus familiaris, Notophthalmus viridescens, Leucobrium glaucum, Polytrichum commune, Acer saccharum, and Quercus rupa. Art is not just a summoning and devotional act, it's a funneling of attention. So rather than asking you to follow me on Instagram or TikTok, I would gently ask that you pour whatever you have to give, appreciation, time, attention, money, or love, into the rivers that made me so that they may continue their keeping, their dreaming, their living. Now, on to my dreaming. For the last 9 months, wow, just like a baby, I've been creating a book, or perhaps a book-shaped wondering, called Wild Minds. It's an attempt to imagine the consciousness of other creatures through language, the natural medium of the human mind, so that we may better imagine the creatures around us. Using my background in fiction and constructed linguistics, I've created a hybrid novella incorporating creative nonfiction sketches of imagined non-human languages, dictionary definitions, and etymologies. It progresses seasonally. In the fall, I imagined the words and worlds of decomposers. In winter, the elements. In spring, plants. And finally, as summer begins, I've been envisioning the language of animals. The goal, however, is not just to imagine the minds of these different beings. It's also to prompt a change in the consciousness of the reader. Throughout the novella, readers are asked to respond to prompts, asking them to envision new ways of being, to write in the language of different species, and to imagine these other ways of thinking. Over the course of this presentation, I want you to get a little taste of that change. To begin, I want you to close your eyes and envision a recent death in your world. This doesn't have to be a literal death. Changes in jobs, breakups, moving, a child going off to school or graduating, even something positive like a promotion or acceptance to a new program can trigger off a death cycle. So take a moment and find a place in your life that is currently occupied by a loss. Right. Now that we have found your dead, we're going to spend some time with the decomposers. Part one, falling. It begins with falling. The scent of wood smoke, the clink of acorns on a tin roof, rain plastering the leaves to the earth, earthworms sliding and leaving their silver trails on the surface. The days are darker now, and around you, everything is dwindling, dying off. Colors recede, light recedes, heat recedes, and in the final moments there are flashes. The startling red of a maple leaf, the winter star returning, the wind through the husks of the corn in the field, violins, breath on glass, and everywhere, everywhere, the pull of matter returning to the earth. The decomposers ask you, what would you like to leave behind? The decomposers ask you, what died this year? The decomposers ask you, who buries your dead? But first, before it all, the most important question, are you willing to change your mind? The language of fungi. The language of fungi is not one language, but many. A reconstitution, a reinvention. It is mutually comprehensible in its building blocks. The word for stone is always stone. The word for ice is always ice. But every fungus will speak it differently. Every species, every colony, every iteration of a body. Sentences are exploratory, branching. The connectors of words sinuous and malleable, allowing single thoughts to meander, nose their way through a landscape, turning and turning again, accruing meaning along the way. There is no concept of an individual, nor of a group. The closest is a subject meaning edge, the edge which is exploring, seeking, and deciding. It is a kaleidoscopic language, experienced without a linear flow, favoring instead a phantasma of images, chemical impressions experienced as simultaneously and inextricably as scent. Memory and sense reality exist in a woven present. Experience of others in the language is limited to points of connection. Others don't exist until touched, entered, experienced, and they are then only discussed in the language of entry points, in terms of ways in. Keys are a favorite phrase of the fungi. Every connection has a key, the perfect shape that will allow the other and the self to become one, to exchange sugar and nitrogen and cellulose, to intertwine until they are thoroughly inextricable, dependent on and inherent in one another. The language of fungi doesn't include frames of beginnings and endings, only levels of complexity. A dead log is a complex thing on the edge of turning. A molecule of carbon is a simple thing with potential. The world is understandable through a lattice of levels, a web wrapped to the shape of a torus, in which everything that is complex is on its way to being simple, everything that is simple is on its way to being complex, and every verb denotes one of these directions. Everything is on its way to being somewhere else, and the language of fungi is the network that processes the busy motion of a living world, shedding and consolidating its way between entropy and order. Excelum, meaning to take apart, to make real, to make true. It comes from xe, the space in between, lu, an insistent, probing, directional curiosity. A glottal stop with vocalic reduplication reflects a mirroring, a doubling, an implication that one is on the other side of what came before. And a final M marks fixation, completion, finality. What has been taken apart by your loss? Throulkaj, meaning to turn hard to digest material into nutrition, to overcome obstacles, to find something in an unexpected place. It comes from through, push, force, expend energy. L, an edge, as in a point of overflow, such as the lip of a waterfall, a bowl filled to the brim. Haj, that which exists without our knowledge or beyond our perception. A glottal stop without vocalic reduplication reflects a sudden shift or discovery, a pivot moment in the processing of experience. What have you found in this place? Ajahn Thrul, one who derives their greatest nutrition from sources that initially seem hazardous or toxic. It comes from Haj, the unknown, the invisible elements contained in the known, used colloquially to refer to toxins inherent in nutrition, the aphoretic poison of that which nourishes. N acts as a tunnel morphine, indicating internalization or drawing in of external matter. Srul, one who breaks bonds with force. Noun derivation reverses the order of the verb, prioritizing the material source, Haj, and attaching the active transformation as a tail, and Thrul, as fungal syntax often knots and inverts to mirror metabolic layering. What seemed like a poison, but only seemed. Gomuelth, the version of a self that is created when a mushroom forms, an ephemeral self created by the changing of the seasons, an overflow, an exuberant expression of subterranean changes, by definition impermanent. It comes from go, from, originating in, created by, mu, earth, soil, saturated and rich, elf, something fragile, misty, veiled, impermanent, ghost-like, something that changes colors when touched, something that falls apart in the rain, often used to mark entities that cross a threshold but cannot remain. Describe the self that lost. Are they still you? Suraval, meaning good ground, a nutritious substrate through which to grow, something to wrap around, chew on, muddle through, food for thought, somewhere to become thoroughly enmeshed. It comes from shu, loam, colonized wood shavings, a rotted log, something soft and absorptive and damp. Ra, a conjunction that acts as a directional link or enfolding gesture in fungal syntax, suggesting both into and among depending on context. Val, a net, a web, a mass of connections which thicken over time. Its long vowel ah is often used in terms related to deep integration or metabolic attention. What have you continued digesting? Enojul, meaning to live in invisible places, in between places, forgotten places. It comes from ven, chasms, crevices, cracks, dark places. The glottal stop introduces a sudden inward shift, used here like a drop or slip between layers. Ojul, to move like a feather, a frond, a celia, a dandelion seed. Where have you fallen? Ulveksan, making yourself into something that will attract others, an alchemy of scent and color that presents an inverted half to be completed. It comes from ul, to attract, to send out signals, to find a register of desire, to lure, to unveil. Vec, to change, to shift, to turn on a gene and express something new. The glottal stop breaks and turns, introduces a pivot point. San, phrase meaning come here, come to me, an imperative in the fungal voice, which is an imperative which doesn't know where they have heard but follows anyway. What version of you do you pretend would never have experienced this? Miran, the pressure inside you, the force that makes it possible to break through cement and move stones aside, the feeling that there's more inside of you than outside, that you are bigger on the inside, and the points of contact between you and the world carry an incredible weight. Comes from Grol, a combination of density and capacity, the force which can take on a heavy load and is activated by it, the feeling in a throat before a roar. Mir, a gathering, a consolidation, the moment a chord is plucked and it finds its note. Ren, an aimed and swift release, the huff of spores from a puffball mushroom, a javelin shot outward. What would it look like to unleash? Vesilun, the odd sensibility of style, dripping inky bodies, candy apple red with white spots, the lacy frilled collar, the thin white mesh of the veil, ectoplasmic green faces, and black Rorschachs on walls. It comes from Ves, the charisma of certain colors, poison dart frog skin, dragonfly wings. Sea, expression, a flourish. And Loon, standing alone in moonlight, gently off kilter. What is yours and yours alone, even when all else has been taken? Maroon, a fairy ring, a conjuring, the summoning of the unseen into the seen through the patterns of embodiment. It comes from Fel, the consideration of patterns, the dots on the cap of an Amanita muscaria, the circle of a fairy ring, the reticulate net of a bridal veil mushroom. Ma, the relationship between a mushroom stem and the earth through which it erupts. And Rune, to make here, to embody, to materialize. What are the greater patterns of your life? How does this death settle? Relith Thozam, a wonderland, a world of bright colors and unusual shapes, a world of metamorphosis and sly experimentation, a world of change carried on wings and futures in titanic drops of water, the truest nature of reality, pink and sticky and shaped like bubbles and things becoming other things and nothing out of reach. It comes from breh, something breaking a surface, a bubble erupting with a dazzle of color. Lih, the gliding, playful sensation of a message being passed along a chain. So, the refracting that comes from infinite repetition, shapes being pressed out of proportion, the tendency of evolution toward the strange. And Zan, a zinging challenge to try something, the message passed along the receptors of insects infected by cordyceps. What if you tried again, but different this time? Stranger. Kethruval, meaning the game of everything, knowing that you can open any door with the right key, that it's possible to turn anything back into the key code of of material, that everything speaks the same language if you're just willing to find your way in. It comes from Keth, the catch before a click, the lock-in sensation. Ru, knowledge contained inside of other knowledge, the imprint of a flower left in honey from a bee inside a golden comb. Val, an open door. What if this were just another challenge? What if there is a way out? Zulmekor, the feeling of the base coat of material slithering along your surface, allowing yourself to be engulfed and engulf in turn by a sheet of cryptograms, puzzles, ways to lockpick with a tongue, digestion as a means of revelation. It comes from Zul, surface slick friction, a whisper through a wet tunnel, a slug on the surface of a rock, rainbow patterns on the surface of the earth. Meh, to enzymatically experiment, to take apart, to split, to snap. 4. To parse, to take apart piece by piece, to digest? What if you already know the answer? Trunvakel, meaning architectures as remnants, the once useful complications of a past life, taking apart the block castle one by one, complexity as a place of leftovers to be dismantled and returned to the simple universals of a wooden block, a brick, a stone. It comes from Trun, structure, heavy and dense, right angles and straight lines which both hold up and weigh down. Va, a peeling back of a layer, and Kel, the simple scission of a part separating from a whole and thereby becoming a whole. What if they're just bones? What if they're just shapes? Kelvation, the taste scent of humans when they step into a fairy ring. Fear and something lighter, hope. It comes from Kel, emotion taste, the tang of fear, smooth, cold, and slightly metallic at the edges. V, a thin ripple, breath on a spider web. Shen, the whispered chime of a maybe, the sense that there are two ways something can go. How strong is your maybe? Kiravosk, the playful dance to figure out a particularly challenging move. The dance with the wind, balloons hiding in stars, mimicking a bird's egg, a flame, a jellyfish. Mimicry, learning from others, an innovation on the form. It comes from chi, darting, repetitive attempts, each drawing closer to an ideal outcome. Ra, into and among depending on context. And vosk, those that are different. What if you just try? Thank you.
Wow, Alwell. Thank you. Speechless, as always, following your work. Really, really beautiful and moving. All right. Transitioning on to our third and final presentation of the day. So, Silka, please feel free to take it away.
Hello everyone. Thanks, Jenny. And I'm just going to share my screen. Can everyone hear me and see me? Is everything okay? Okay, perfect. Thanks. All right. What am I gonna do? So, full screen mode. Is it working? Okay. The last time it didn't work, so I'm a bit scared. Yeah. So my name is Silke, and I'm an artist. I live and work in London. I originally come from Germany, and I moved here in 2018 to do my master. And my practice is like multidisciplinary. So is my main medium is painting, but I also do sculpture and video installation, and this is how the kind of like connection between like craft or like old artistic mediums comes together with like technology. And for the fellowship, I worked on Siren Emissaries, and it's a work that looks into the communication of corals, which I kind of like, I started this research like 2 years ago. It was, so my work is basically oriented on color, like I'm really into color and try to communicate through it, or like I have a special awareness for it. And so I was interested in these organisms and how they basically, like, why are they so beautiful? That was my main question, and I was really inspired by their colors. And then I found out how they do that, basically through a kind of like collaboration through other organisms, which is like an algae. And so this coral research led me towards like a scientist who looked into coral communication basically into sound. So corals are kind of like, you can imagine them, they're like static, so they can't move or anything. So they need to attract organism into their estate in order to survive and to get food. And the way how they do it is through sound, but also through chemical signaling. And the sound aspect is not really well researched, so it's still not, like there's still a lot of work to do. And I found this researcher, Camila Rimoldi-Ibanez, and she made a research on it. And I wanted to share a sound so that you can hear it. I'm just going to go out of the presentation for a second. So the sound is really minimalistic. I can already say that, so I don't really know if you can hear it properly. And I don't know if you heard it, but there was a little click. So this click basically was what they do, like this is their sound. It's kind of like a clicking sound. Just gonna go back into the presentation. Yeah, so the sound they're doing is basically like this clicking sound. It's really not often, but it's a really high frequency they're operating on. So it's almost that it's almost ultrasonic, and we can't really hear like the full spectrum of the sound. But it's a really low energy sound. So this is how they kind of like attract other organisms into their estate. And what I then did was I basically created, in order to, like I wanted to work with the sound, and I wanted to kind of like create an audiovisual installation or work to make that sound experience, so that like we as humans can experience it. And as I'm coming from this painterly background, you kind of create a lot of like digital sketches. And for this particular work, I created like a lot of these digital sketches, which you can see here. And the idea, like I was thinking about, okay, what can I use as a kind of like base footage for it? And by the time, or like throughout the last half of year, I attended quite a few like techno events, and I was inspired by this whole kind of like collaborative energy that came, that you can experience through these events, which are like, it's related to music, it's also to a heightened state of consciousness. And there is like a kind of like really collective, like it's a collective experience you have. And I found it kind of like similar. It resonated quite a lot with me, how corals basically communicate with their environment as well. They try to create this energy around them in order to provide a healthy space. And then when this is basically there, then the whole reef is alive and really vibrant, and a lot of like organisms come to this space. So, and basically the digital paintings I created were fed into a neural network, and it kind of like created these dreamlike landscapes. And it was interesting for me to work with a neural network in this way, because it's a lot of like kind of different mediums coming together. It's from like sound, and then from like a visual approach, and then you work with a neural network, which basically works with prompts, which is like language again, which I found it in this way quite, I felt like there was a bit of a glitch of how I usually work, like from a visual way, and then to describe these images basically in a language, which you usually need to do in order so that the neural network can develop. And it was a kind of like an interesting insight, because I feel I mean, the neural network I worked with was like image based, and then to find like the right words for it was really difficult. Also, like me coming from a German background, for example, is like we have much more words in order to describe certain objects or subjects. So it felt quite limited in a way. And so then I created from this input I had from the neural network and from the sound, the simulation, which basically morphs images into each other based on the choral sound. And then it creates a kind of, I hope it works. Yeah, it creates this kind of like particle simulation, which basically it's a kind of like digital sculpture. I see it as a digital sculpture, or like it develops like the 2D images into 3D space. And although it's, I mean, I see it as like a, I mean, we see it on a screen, but there is still this whole process behind it, and it works like from the sound of this organism, and from like a human kind of creation, and it all comes together. So that's a kind of like interesting work process for me to basically see the coral as an organism and as like a collaborator in the work, and not as like I don't like I'm not kind of like feel like I use it as a material. For me, it's really more like a collaborator. Yeah, and I'm kind of out of it. Give me a second.
To see the visuals for a little bit longer, I think.
Yeah. How do you get out of this slide?
If you'd like, we can manually have you stop sharing screen, and then you could share. Oh, there you go.
Yeah, okay. Okay, so yeah, this was the idea to present the main installation as like a moving kind of like moving image work. Yeah, that was it. Thank you.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Silke. That it was just so gorgeous to see your work and how it's evolved over the last 9 months. Gorgeous.
Thank you.
All right. So, folks, if you have questions for Silke, Alwell, or Mattheus, please feel free to put them in the chat. And we've been collecting a few already, and so we are going to move on to our Q&A portion. So I'm just going to stop sharing there really quick. All right, and as a reminder, this meeting, we said it was going to take place from 11 to 12. I do imagine that we may go over that, and so please, those of you that need to hop off, feel free to do so, and there will be a recording available following the event, and we'll send it out to everyone that registered. So if you have to hop off, we'll understand, and you'll be able to catch up on any part of the conversation that you may have missed. So now we will transition to our Q&A, and so I'm going to see if we can, or maybe Jason or Joey could help me spotlight Mattheus, Silke, and myself. And I know that Allwell, we would love to have you spotlighted as well, but we've learned today that Zoom doesn't quite let folks be spotlighted unless they are sharing their camera. And so we know that Allwell's voice is strong and powerful and is here with us as well. All right, I'm going to start and ask a few questions that we've come up with together, and then we will transition to the questions from the chat. So, the first question I will ask is to Matheus. Matheus, what do you think is lost when we fail to see non-human beings as part of our extended communities? Conversely, what do we gain when we do?
Yeah, thank you, Jenny, and thank you, Orwell and Silke for these amazing presentations. I think throughout our presentations, we touched upon this topic, and what really stands out for me is that uh, when we exclude non-human beings from our communities, we lose the sense of relationality that grounds, I think, ethical and emotional dimensions of life, and it kind of dulls our capacity for care, empathy, and there's ecological responsibility. And I think that this connection contributes to environmental degradation, because it projects a fragmented worldview that frames nature solely as a resource, this modern nature versus culture divide. And on the contrary, when we recognize non-human beings and as kin, I think it expands our capacity for multi-species collaboration, and help us to think about what is art, what is technology, what is innovation, grounded in this reciprocity, in a more inclusive context.
So thanks, Matheus. And that feeds well, I feel, into the question that I'm going to ask Allwell next, which harkens back to one of our earliest meetings as a fellowship. So, Allwell, in one of our sessions, you posed the question, what if a caterpillar is as deserving of dignity as a human? If we were to truly embrace this perspective, what do you think would be the first changes in our social structures, laws, or daily behaviors? How might this shift ripple through the next generation and the ones after that?
I love this question, and I think about it all the time. I suppose I am inherently biased, but I would say the first answer is in language. The fact that we constantly refer to non-human creatures as it. We use the pronoun it for them. And I I personally just use human sort of gendered pronouns for everything. And I've noticed that people really get taken aback when I'm like, "Oh my God, look at that tree. She's so beautiful." People are like, "Yeah, she is so beautiful." And I'm like, "Yeah." And it immediately invites you into this totally different way of interacting with the beings that are around you all the time. And the way that we've placed this primacy that's just, reinforced by our day-to-day language, I think that that would immediately start dissolving. Um, Further than that, I'm really interested in the work of people who are imagining these sort of creaturely bills of rights. I think that it's a really useful way of thinking about the world around us, the way that we talk about, in America, everyone has the right to life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness, right? And thinking about for every being that's around us, what are the things that are inherent to them? What what does a jellyfish have to have the right to be able to exist? What does a caterpillar have to have the right to be able to exist in their most caterpillary way? And that once you start thinking about it through that framework, it really does trickle down into everything from waste management and pollution management to the way that we manage borders and imagine nationhood and all of these things. If we think about everything that's alive should have a right to be able to do the things that make them themselves, then I think it would change the way that we think about nearly everything. But start with the pronouns. Call a tree a she.
That's so interesting. And it makes me think of Kim Stanley Robinson's Ministry for the Future, where there is an office, kind of a UN type office that is established in the wake of a big tragedy, a big human tragedy, natural disaster, one could say. And there's the establishment of the Ministry for the Future, whose role is to protect the rights of future generations with the same standing as current generations. And so I love the thought of that expanding and being encompassing of all life on Earth as well, not just humans' right to continue on, but everyone to be able to. Really interesting. All right, Silka, I'm going to ask you the next question. So, Silka, coral reefs are among the most endangered ecosystems on Earth, yet your work illuminates their vibrancy. What role do you think beauty and awe play in inspiring action for conservation?
I think beauty and awe is is an interesting concept because I feel it creates a kind of space that gives the possibility to stay in a moment of maybe awkwardness or where things feel a bit off longer. So it creates a kind of, yeah, beauty creates a kind of like a resonance in the body that makes you more aware of the situation and makes you feel you can challenge or not challenge, you can overcome the challenge in a more easier way, and it creates like a silence or a calm, and I think that's a really great position to respond from when you are not overwhelmed, when you are more like you come from an intuitive point of view. So I think in that sense, it's really, it's important to approach this idea or this challenges we are facing from this point of view.
Yeah, I think that resonates strongly. All right. Well, we have a few other questions that we came up with together. However, there are plenty of questions in the chat. So those of you that are still with us, please feel free to put any questions you have for Silka, Matthias, Awell, or all of the above. I'm going to start asking the first one that's on my list here, which is for Matthias. Which particular aspect challenged your preconceived notions? And like, what were potential challenges in integrating them?
That's a good question. I was thinking about it while I was trying to prepare for it. And one thing that came to mind about preconceived notions was really related to gender in this case, because it's a very masculine, like traditional masculine environment with the fishers. And I was really worried because I'm not the traditional masculine presenting man, especially in southern Brazil. And I was worried, like, how am I going to be perceived here? Are they going to, like, how are they going to react with my presence here? And they were very open. And when we were talking about the dolphins, something interesting happens also that is related to gender, is that they usually name the dolphins like male names, and most of the time they are females, and then they realize that during the way, and then they have to adapt the name for a female name. And in Portuguese, it's usually put an A in the end of the name, and it sounds weird, but it's like, oh, now it's feminine. And it's interesting to see how they sometimes like some of the fishers says, oh no, but that dolphin was a male, and he changed, now it's a female. And it was funny, like it was funny because I felt like they were comfortable with the dolphins changing gender, which is not like they're not changing gender, but and they were also kind of comfortable with me being there and not being, masculine presenting, and still finding a way to to connect in this scenario. So I think that was the challenge. It was the challenge and the way to incorporate like through this conversation with them.
How interesting. Great. The next question that we have in the chat, we're going to do for Awel. Awel, which of the seasonal points of view did you find most challenging or rewarding to work on?
I mean, the answer is predictably that they're one and the same. In winter, I was writing about sort of abiotic elements of our living world. So thinking about things like fire, water, darkness, all of these things, and imagining them through the frame of language was really challenging because if you think about it, it's easier for me to imagine the language of animals and even things like plants and fungi because they are still living creatures that in some ways participate very vibrantly in a shared relation of sending and receiving information and communicating with the individuals around them of their species and of other species. And so it's not that big of a jump to be like, let's talk about the language of fungi, because fungi are communicating with other fungi within themselves as a singular organism and collective organisms and with the other creatures around them. So that was all pretty straightforward in as much as something like this is straightforward. But in winter, I was working with those elements and trying to imagine what is the language of darkness? What is the language of water? What is the language of fire? These things that are so ever present around us and they are such, elemental forces shaping our world. And yet we don't ever perceive of them as being individuals that would communicate or sort of navigable entities. They're just these ever present forces. But I found that, of course, trying to think about a language and a grammar of those things was really, really, really useful. And it really changed the way that I interacted with the world around me because it takes them off of the sort of invisible pedestal of assumption. These things that are just, oh, they're just there. Darkness just happens. It just is. But when you think about what would what would it mean to think like darkness? What would it mean to exist like darkness? What would it mean to move through a room like darkness or to commune with something else like darkness does? It just opens up these doors in your brain and takes you out of even a creaturely assumption of right and responsibility and into an even deeper understanding that the way that we exist even as a living thing is only one way of existing in this world, and you have to be protecting also the rights of things like a dark sky to exist. We've infringed on that as well. We've infringed on the rights of rivers to exist as they do and air to exist as it does and all of these things. So yeah, winter elements, that's the one.
Oh, well, I think that that feeds really well into the next question that I'm going to ask that came from the chat to Matthias, because it makes me think about the sound pollution that Matthias touched on, that the dolphins really have no choice but to experience, given that that is their full world. So, about the dolphins, Matthias, what benefits do the dolphins receive from helping humans?
Yes, that's a question that the sorry. That the biological area doesn't agree with the anthropological area. Well, it's not that they don't agree, but they want to quantify it. One thing is that the dolphins that uh, it's like they kind of choose to if they want to collaborate or not in the same family. Some dolphins collaborate and others don't. And the ones that do live longer, that's the data that we have. And they think that they get more fish because when the fishers throw the nets, the fishers scatter and it's an easier prey for the dolphins. And then the anthropologists are saying things like, well, maybe they just enjoy the company because they come there, they play with they don't just fish, but sometimes they do like this uh shows in the water where they jump and show off, and they have this like one of the fishers is the one that I showed the picture has been fishing for over 50 years, and some of the dolphins are over 50 years, so they have this really long relationship, and the fishers usually tell us, oh yeah, they recognize us, they know who we are. So there's these two things, like I think they can get more fish, but they also have this connection, I believe, with the fishers, as the
Yeah.
fishers have with the dolphins.
And Matthias, can I ask you to share a little bit more about what you shared in one of our cohort meetings about the ways that dolphins and the fishers mourn together?
Yeah, so in one of the locations, Laguna, they have a cemetery for the dolphins. Like it's a memorial. The bodies are not buried there, but they have like these crosses with their names. Um, and it's very touching to see it. And when you interview the fishers, you usually hear like the stories they are talking, like sometimes they talk about the loss of someone in their family, like, oh yes, my father died and he used to fish with that dolphin that also died, and they connect like their lives and their deaths, so it's very interconnected. um and one of the younger fishers told us that, for example, his mother passed away when he was very young, and then he had like this new mother that was the dolphin. The Geraldona is like the main dolphin of the area. Everyone loves Geraldona. She's like the mother of several other dolphins that also collaborate with the fishers. So it's very beautiful to see this kind of like kinship, that it's more than just a word. It's not just that he's calling her mother. It's actually like that dolphin has been there every day as he was growing up, and he was like learning to fish with his father and the dolphin, because they also need to learn how to read the signs. So the dolphin teaches them, and the fishers teach the dolphins also like how to present the signs so they can understand.
Mm, so beautiful. I think that goes into a question that I would like to pose to all three of you, which is that grief is a possible undercurrent in all of your works, whether it's species loss, environmental degradation, or the disappearance of ancient human-animal relationships. How do you each navigate the tension between grief and hope in your creative practices? Just some light conversation for our afternoon together.
Okay.
I can start. I think it came up in one of our meetings we had at the beginning of the year, and I was reading, or I was listening to this to a podcast from Judith Butler by the time, and she was talking a lot about grief, and she kind of approached it also as a form of like yeah, it's like a whole concept basically, and but it doesn't necessarily need to be like negative. Like it can also be like yeah, if you accept it and if you overcome it, then grief can be a beautiful thing that gives you the opportunity to tackle challenges which you haven't been able to overcome yet. So I feel out of grief comes a lot of like possibility, and this is how I see this whole ecological disaster we are living in. So I think most of us have accepted it's there, and now it's time to act, basically. So we are now more in this possibility state.
Yeah, that makes sense. Matthias or Alwell, would you like to respond?
Yeah, I can. I think I've touched upon a few topics. I'm just gonna conclude by saying that um, I think what helps me navigate is because, for example, if you read the articles, the papers that people are producing in the area, some say that this practice is doomed and is going to be extinct. Like they have the data, they can calculate it. Even then, the fishers are there every day. Every day, if it's raining, if it's like super hot, it doesn't matter. The dolphins are also always there. And then we see like this strange attractors thing that it was very important in ecological studies because it showed that a healthy population is not one that is always stable and in equilibrium. Actually, the opposite, because if that happens, it can be like a change that everything like ends suddenly. So this chaotic aspect of it helped me think a little bit and give me hope about this. And as I've shared in our last meeting, this collaborative practice that was extinguished in one location is now coming back to that location, and we were able to map that out. So this also like gives me hope. So just interacting with the fishers, and they will never read the paper that says that the practice is going to be extinguished, but they are aware of the challenges, and they still like are there every day. So fishing gives them hope, and for me, it's like making art about it gives me hope, and to share it with the world.
Fantastic. Oh, well, how about you? How do you navigate that tension?
Yeah, I mean, I I always return to grief being a good thing. There's a quote, I think it's by Jamie Anderson, that says, "Grief is love with nowhere to go." And I think one of the things that's hardest about climate change is that we all know it's happening and we're upset by it and we think it's bad and it shouldn't be going on. But it's also this thing that's kind of distant, and it can be hard to conceptualize it and wrap your head around it. And also, I think a lot of people would say that they care about the environment, but I don't know if we all necessarily feel that we have an intimate relationship with the environment. I think a lot of us feel distanced by the simple facts of modernity. And if you're actually able to be experiencing grief, then it means that you also have love, right? It means that you do actually have this genuine emotional connection to the world around you. And I often seek out and spend time with material that makes me feel that grief because it's a reminder of the real connection that I have to this world, and that even if I'm not, you know, living off the land the way that my ancestors would have 200, 500, 700 years ago, that I am still somebody who has a real and living and vibrant connection to this world. And I can be as proud of and invested in that love as I would be of the love that I feel for my partner because it is alive in me. So yeah, I think grief is it's a good thing. It's a reminder of what is there.
Beautifully said. All right, I have one more question from the chat, and then I'll ask you all one more final question, the three of you, and then that will take us to the end of this conversation. Thank you for those of you that are still with us. All right, Mattheus, last question for you is, could you talk a little about consent in your work in relation to Indigenous peoples and their relationships to the dolphins?
Yeah. I'm not sure if they mean like when they say indigenous peoples, if they are referring to my previous work, because I've worked with indigenous people, as part of my research, and currently I my whole idea is to take indigenous philosophy seriously and as a way to think about the questions of contemporary technology and art. So I'm applying that in this project. But the artisanal fishers, they would not be considered indigenous people in Brazil. They are, of course, traditional communities. We have several terms for different types of groups of people here in Brazil. So with that, I will answer based on the features. I'm also working in the group that is conducting this process to register the practice as as a heritage, in intangible heritage of Brazil. And then we are producing a documentary and a dossier that will be examined by a jury that will determine whether or not this is it should be recognized as, and if it does, it will get a lot of like protection, legal protection in different areas. For example, they won't be able to just dump the sewage there as they want to do now. So the community asked for this recognition, and our group it's kind of like working, not directly for them, but kind of is. And that's how I got to meet some of them and to start this relation. So the relation to the work is my relation with them is prior to the artwork. And I present the ideas and the artwork. I don't really present them as, oh, I'm doing an artwork, because to talk about like art in Brazil in general, like contemporary art is not something that everyone will know what it is, including like the scientists, like the biologists were completely shocked that something like what I do exists in the world. So I just talk about like, oh, what I'm doing with the sounds, how this is going. And I ask, well, how they feel about it. I get feedback, and the project changes based on these interactions. And then I don't know if that answers, and consent, like I have, if you mean by the use of the image and sounds, we have their consents, written consents. I don't know if that's what you were asking.
Nice. I think that captures a good,
Yeah.
yeah. All right. I'm going to turn us to our last question that I'll ask to the three of you. If your work could spark just one shift in how people engage with the more than human world, what would it be? Or what would you hope it would be?
I hope it would be awareness of that nature is actually really alive, and the one who is dying is we as humans. So yeah, so whatever happens to nature will still be there, and we just gonna get distinct. So I think that's really important to understand how nature operates, and to be in communication with it.
Thank you.
Well, I think that for me, I would hope that um, this would help us move away from seeing the human or humanity as a uniform destructive force, and towards recognizing like the multiple relational modes of being human, especially those that foster biodiversity and care, as we have the examples of the fishers or the indigenous communities. And you know, by questioning this hegemonic colonial conception of humanity that sees a separation between human and nature as a resource, I think we can shape and co-create models that work on this like resonance, and help us integrate into that, rather separate from the living systems we inhabit.
Lovely.
I think that the biggest thing that I would have hoped that people would take away is that our our minds are these massive things that are capable of change, and that the way that we choose to feed them, and the media that we choose to interact with, and the type of stories that we choose to read, and the ways that we choose to think, go on to shape every single action that we make. And if you want the world to be full of people who are doing things differently, then the world first has to be full of people who are choosing to think differently. And I've been fed so much by the research that I've done about consciousness and about other forms of consciousness and non-human consciousness and the way that art can convey those. And the biggest thing is just the shift in my internal lived world. And that's not something that I can convey to you guys, but I would just hope that everybody realized that there's ways that we could be living inside of our own minds that are going to change the way that we live in this world. And that's where we have to start.
Beautiful. Thank you all so much. And we actually got one more question in the chat, so I'm going to ask it. Are any of the fellows reading Karen Barad? Looks like maybe no. Well, could be a good suggestion for a future reading. Awesome. All right. Beautiful. Well, I think that that gets us to the end of our Q&A. I'm going to stop the recording here in just a moment, and then if folks want to stay on a little bit longer and chat, we can do that. But for now, I just wanted to say thank you all so much for coming and being a part of this. Thank you so much to our fellows for the amazing work that they've done over the last 9 months. It's truly inspiring and just my absolute favorite part of the work that I get to do as well. So it's an honor to be among you. And thank you again to everyone who helped make this possible. The whole CSI team and Leonardo team being here, helping make sure everything ran smoothly. Really appreciate it. I think that's it. Thank you all so much. And I'm going to stop recording.